There are two stories that came out of Buckingham Palace yesterday. One is the story the palace wanted you to talk about. The other is the one buried underneath it, and it tells you far more about where this family actually stands right now than any press release was designed to reveal. Let's do both. Start with the headline that genuinely stunned royal historians when it landed on Thursday morning. King Charles III will not move into Buckingham Palace. Not after his reign ends, not after the renovation, not ever. For the rest of his time on the throne, he and Queen Camilla will remain at Clarence House, the compact royal residence they have lived in since 2003, when Charles was still Prince of Wales. The announcement was made by James Chalmers, the keeper of the Privy Purse, during the annual briefing on royal finances. His exact words, "After careful consideration and to greatly increase opportunities for public access, the King and Queen have decided not to adopt Buckingham Palace as a personal residence and will instead continue to use Clarence House as their London home." Now, let me explain why that one sentence is genuinely extraordinary. Buckingham Palace has been the official London residence of every British monarch since Queen Victoria moved in 1837. That is 189 years of royal tradition ended in a single press briefing. Every king and queen since Victoria, Edward VII, George V, George VI, Elizabeth II, lived there. Elizabeth II spent 60 years of her reign in that building. Her apartment is still inside it. And now Charles, who has known his entire life that Buckingham Palace was waiting for him when he became king, has looked at it and said, "No thank you." Here is the detail that makes this even more remarkable. That palace did not just sit there waiting. Beginning in 2017, the royal household launched a 10-year, £369 million renovation program, funded by British taxpayers through the Sovereign Grant, specifically to update its obsolete Victorian plumbing, rewire its electrical systems, replace failing boilers, and upgrade the building so it could continue to house the monarchy for another 50 years. Electric vehicle charging points were installed across the estate. Entire wings were stripped back and rebuilt from the inside. The project is scheduled to be completed next year. It was always understood by everyone involved that the renovation was being done so Charles and his successors could live there. And now Charles has confirmed he will not. The palace's official explanation is public access. By not living there, more of the building can be open to visitors. It currently receives about 700,000 visitors a year. Royal officials say the decision will allow the palace to host more events, expand public tours, and become what Chalmers described as the ceremonial and operational center of the monarchy rather than a private home. He called it both a change from the past and a recognition of the future. And to be fair, that reasoning is not entirely without merit. When a monarch lives in a building, significant portions of it are necessarily closed to the public for security reasons. Without a resident king, more doors can open. But here is where the story stops being about architecture and starts being about something more interesting. Because it turns out Charles is not the only member of this family who has decided Buckingham Palace is not for him. William, the Prince of Wales, the future King of England, has already said the same thing, according to reporting from Hello Magazine in May. When William becomes king, he plans to remain at Forest Lodge in Windsor, the 8-bedroom property he moved into with Kate and the children last October after upgrading from their previous Windsor home, Adelaide Cottage. His editor, Emily Nash, described Forest Lodge as the family's forever home. William and Kate made clear when they left London for Windsor in 2022 that they wanted their children to have green space and freedom, and every decision since has reinforced that choice. Interior designer Nikki Haslam, an old friend of Charles, told the Daily Mail that he finds the prospect alarming. "Turning Buckingham Palace into an office is wrong, period. William won't use it either," he said. "It stops Buckingham Palace being the jewel in the crown." So let's do the maths on this, because I think the number deserves to sit in front of you for a moment. British taxpayers have spent, or are in the process of spending, £369 million on renovating a building that the current king will not live in and the future king has also said he will not live in. The building is not being sold. It is not being converted into anything formally different. It will remain, in the palace's own words, Monarchy HQ, used for state banquets, garden parties, audiences with ambassadors, and public tours. Graham Smith, the chief executive of Republic, the anti-monarchy campaign group, noted with some understatement that, despite ongoing concerns about the huge cost of the royals, the grant will remain hugely inflated. He pointed out that the sovereign grant, the taxpayer funding the monarchy receives annually, is set to rise to £99.9 million in the year beginning 2027, up from its 2012 level of £31 million. If that had risen by inflation, Smith said, the grant would stand at $45 million, not $100 million. The government agreed to spend $369 million refurbishing Buckingham Palace, and now Charles doesn't want to use it. But the public won't get to own it or decide what happens to it. It will remain under lock and key for when he does. Now here is the second story, the one that came out of the same briefing on the same day and that the palace clearly hoped would generate more warmth than controversy. For the first time in the history of the British monarchy, a reigning king voluntarily disclosed his personal tax bill. Charles paid $12.9 million in income and capital gains taxes in the 2024-25 financial year. He paid $11.7 million the year before. Since ascending the throne in September 2022, he has paid more than $30 million in total, placing him, according to palace officials, among the top 100 taxpayers in the United Kingdom. Prince William also released his personal tax figures for the first time. $7.76 million paid in 2024-25, down from $8.34 million the previous year, on income primarily from the Duchy of Cornwall. These numbers sound impressive, and in isolation they are. But here is the context the palace briefing was very carefully designed not to put those numbers next to. Charles has no legal obligation to pay any of this, zero. The relevant legislation explicitly does not apply to the Crown. The Duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall are Crown bodies that share that same legal immunity. Charles is choosing to pay tax voluntarily under a memorandum of understanding that his mother established in 1993 and that could theoretically be revised or abandoned at any point. The Washington Post, reporting from London yesterday, put it plainly. The first ever tax disclosure by a British monarch was partly intended to contain the damage from revelations about the finances of the king's disgraced brother, Andrew. The timing, in other words, is not accidental. The palace is trying to change the conversation. After months of Epstein files, Andrew's arrest on his birthday, allegations about secret financial threats to the king, and an open police investigation, what the institution needs is a new cycle about transparency and modernization. So Charles revealed his tax bill, announced he's opening up the palace to more tourists, and the headlines moved, at least temporarily, from his brother to his finances. But even the tax disclosure, according to financial analysts who immediately began pulling it apart, is not as transparent as it looks. Tax Policy UK, examining the numbers published Thursday, noted a significant gap between what the disclosed income from the Duchy of Lancaster would generate in tax at the maximum rate and the actual £12.9 million figure. The difference, they calculated, implies at minimum an additional £4.2 million in income from Charles's personal investment portfolio, a portfolio whose existence is confirmed in the royal finances documents, but whose size and income are, quote, not disclosed. The anti-monarchy group Republic went further. The government agreed to spend £369 million on refurbishing Buckingham Palace, and now Charles doesn't want to use it, but he'll keep it under lock and key for when he does. The transparency, in other words, has limits, carefully chosen limits. Now bring Camilla into this, because she is sitting inside these announcements in a way that very few commentators have yet pointed out. Inside the newly renovated Buckingham Palace, the palace where she will not live, a room is being created specifically in her honor. It is called the Consort's Library. 3 historic rooms in the North Wing are being transformed into a space honoring Prince Albert, Queen Alexandra, the late Prince Philip, and Camilla. The library will serve as an official audience room for the Queen, support educational initiatives, and become a feature on public tours of the palace. A room named after her, in a building she won't live in. The optics of that arrangement are worth sitting with. Camilla has spent 2 decades building her position inside this institution. She has a library in her name at Buckingham Palace. She won't actually be there. Charles will remain at Clarence House. She will remain with him at Clarence House, for now, for as long as Charles is alive and king. Here is the question that nobody in yesterday's briefing came anywhere near answering. What happens to Clarence House when Charles dies? When William becomes king, Clarence House does not automatically remain Camilla's. Property arrangements for a dowager queen, a queen whose husband is no longer king, are subject to negotiation, tradition, and ultimately the goodwill of the new monarch. William has made clear, through every decision he has taken with the Duchy of Cornwall and every staffing choice he has made over the past 3 years, that he intends to run his monarchy his way, with his people reflecting his priorities. He has also made clear, through the removal of Camilla's sister from the duchy payroll and the tiara dispute at Peter Philip's wedding, that his goodwill toward Camilla has limits. She may have a library named after her in Buckingham Palace. She may have the title of Queen Consort for the rest of Charles's reign. But the moment that reign ends, the residence she is currently living in, the staff she currently employs, and the access she currently has to every royal property in the kingdom all shift from being her right to being William's discretion. The palace that bears her library will become William's official working headquarters. The house she lives in will become William's to allocate.
And William has already demonstrated, methodically and without drama, exactly how he intends to use that kind of authority. There is one final detail from yesterday's briefing worth recording, because it tells you something true about where this family is and where it is going. The sovereign grant, the public money that funds the monarchy, is rising to £132.1 million for 2025-26. That is more than 4 times what it was in 2012. The palace's explanation involves the Crown estate revenues that the grant is benchmarked against and the cost of maintaining historic properties. But the underlying arithmetic is stark. The public is paying more for a monarchy that has just confirmed its 2 most senior figures will not live in the most famous royal building in the world, the building those same public funds have spent a decade restoring. Charles called it a change from the past and a recognition of the future. His critics called it exactly what it is, a monarchy that spent £500 million on a palace and decided, after the work was done, that nobody wanted it after all. Whatever the future of Buckingham Palace turns out to be, one thing is already settled. It will not be a home. It will be a museum, an office, an event space, and a backdrop for tourists. The actual business of being king, the morning meetings, the red boxes, the family dinners, the daily private life of the monarchy will happen somewhere else, at Clarence House, where Charles and Camilla have always been, and eventually at Forest Lodge in Windsor, where William and Kate have already planted their roots and raised their children. The palace that defined the British monarchy for 2 centuries will remain standing, freshly renovated, open for tours. What it will not have, for the first time since 1837, is a king sleeping in it at night.